It'll be a 3-1. Swung on and driven down the right field line. Fair, the game is over. It's a fair ball into the corner. Bellamy scores. Johnny Davis gets his sixth hit of the day. A Reggie single. Ball game over. Yankees win. Yankees win. I'm back. It'll be a 3-1.
Welcome everyone to the Sports GI Network, and today in this video, I'm talking about the Yankees in the AL East, but also the baseball playoff predicament. As we have two teams who are collapsing, who we all thought during the middle of the season were going to be slam dunk playoff teams, yet might both miss out the playoffs, in the Tigers and Mets. So we're going to talk about that, but also I'm going to talk about the Yankees, of course, because the Yankees are only 2 games back of the Toronto Blue Jays for the division. And at one point, it looked like the division was over. It looked like the Blue Jays were going to win it, and the Yankees were just going to have to sell for the wild card spot. Now, the Yankees still might only get to the top wild card, but there's a chance that the Yankees could get the division. And yeah, it's crazy. The Blue Jays clinch a playoff spot, and I don't think any other team in the American League has. I don't think Seattle has yet. Maybe I could be wrong about Seattle, but I know the Yankees do have a shot if they win tonight against the Chicago White Sox to clinch a playoff spot. So hopefully they just get it done, win tonight, just get a playoff spot at least, and then start worrying about the division. So yeah, I'm gonna talk about that, and then of course, like I said, the Mets and Tigers and their whole shenanigans. So we'll go from there. And thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and share and comment and share and things like that. We'll go from there. Let me hang on. Sorry, just getting some. Trying to see where's the screenshot. I put some screenshots to help contextualize what's going on in the baseball. Okay, I got it. All right, so I'm gonna start with the division first, and then we'll go to the Mets Tigers, like I mentioned. Sorry to sound redundant there, but so the Yankees. So right now the Yankees are 2 games back, hitting standings behind the Blue Jays. As with 6 games to go, I think every team has 6 games to go. All the teams in baseball, six games to go. As you see, the Blue Jays clinch a playoff spot. Yankees are 2 back. Yankees are 7-3 in the last 10. Blue Jays 6-4. Boston has no shot in the division unless you have epic collapses from both teams. Which ironically, the Boston does play Toronto, so you have that, and then here's the wild card standings as the Yankees are a top wild card, and then they're gonna get that at least. Like they're safe in terms of top wild card, in my opinion. Then you get the Red Sox a couple games behind. Cleveland's emerge out of nowhere. Like Cleveland was done early in the beginning of the month, but now they're in the playoff hunt. Obviously, that helps with the Tigers collapse, and then the Astros got swept by Seattle this past weekend. So Astros are outside looking in terms of division crown and even playoff spot because Cleveland has a tiebreaker over them. So yeah, it's getting crazy this playoffs, the playoff standings and etc. And now the Yankees. Do I think they have a shot to get the division? For me, I'm gonna say 50-50. Or if you had asked me this like a week ago or even a couple of days ago, I would have said 80% no, 20% yes. But now it's 50-50 because look at the Blue Jays' main schedule. They played 3 games against the Red Sox, who are also flying for a playoff spot. It's not secure with them. They're trying to, avoid being the 3rd wild card spot and trying to avoid potentially missing the playoffs. So try and at least secure a playoff spot. So these games do matter for Boston. And so I think Boston's going to play hard against them and could play spoilers against Toronto. So they have that disadvantage, the Blue Jays. And then they'll have 3 games afterwards against Tampa as their final series. And Tampa usually plays Toronto tough recently, but so there's that element. So especially the Boston series, that's why it's 50-50 because the Red Sox, they have Crochet, they have, they got guys like not Roman Anthony, Durant on that team, and I think Roman Anthony's hurt if I remember from the Red Sox. They have a young team that's about to look like about to make the playoffs. They shot to make the playoffs, and they have something playing for. And Toronto also does. So that's kind of like the Blue Jays have had their hands full with Boston. who want to try to clinch a playoff spot early as they can to avoid missing the playoffs and being that third wild card. You have that, and then the Yankees is a coming schedule. They play the White Sox, and then they play the Orioles at home. By the way, Toronto and the Yankees have their last 6 games are at home each. In Toronto for the Blue Jays, and in Yankee Stadium for the Yankees, obviously. And they have 3 games against the White Sox, and 3 games against the Orioles, who they just played. And these teams, the Orioles and White Sox, they're not good. They have nothing to play for. They can play spoilers. The Orioles series can be tricky considering the Orioles will love to spoil against the Yankees. There's a little tension between the two teams, etc. But same time, it's not like they don't exactly have a lot to play for either. And yeah, they could try to play spoiler, but at the same time, the the Orioles, the wrong bird team in the AL East. The Orioles, as good as they're not as talented as the Yankees, or the terms, especially with like some of the injuries they got and etc. And them trade away like a bunch of their players during the trade deadline. They're not as talented as the Yankees, so they might try to play spoiler, but they might have a hard time doing it in like Tampa would against Toronto, just because of the talent they've traded off during the trade deadline and etc. So Tampa has nothing to play for, and Tampa did trade several players during the trade deadline. I mean, Caballero's from Tampa, and he's on the Yankees, so you have him, other guys too, Tampa traded for. But I feel like the Orioles are much worse, are definitely a much worse team than the Rays are. Just look at the record and talent. There's a reason why Baltimore is last and Tampa is fourth. It's not an accident. So that's why I think the Yankees, that's why it's 50-50, because Toronto has a much harder schedule going against Boston, who has something to play for in the playoff, try to make the playoffs, and then Tampa is a much better team than Baltimore, and they might want to play spoiler too, just like the Orioles are going to try to play against the Yankees. So yeah, I think both teams, Blue Jays and Yankees, have that spoiler thing to worry about with their division rivals, but the Yankees have a much better chance just because they're playing the White Sox, who suck, and then the Orioles, who also suck and are just terrible. One of the most disappointing teams of baseball this season, just because heading into the season, a lot of people, including myself, thought the Orioles were going to make the playoffs at least, had a shot, but they have just they just fell off and just had an atrocious season. They fired their manager, and yeah, and the GM did a horrible job in the off season, game pieces and stuff, not spending money during the off season. That's his fault. But I think personally the it's 50-50, just because the Yankees have a much easier schedule. The Yankees could legitimately go 5-1 or 6-0 against these 6 teams. I mean, these 2 teams in 6 games. I have seen that happening. The Blue Jays, I'll be shocked if they went 6-0 or even 5-1, just because of who they're playing. But at the same time, the Blue Jays go 4-2 since they have a 2-game lead. The Yankees go 6-0, which that even if they finish tied, the Blue Jays do have the tiebreaker over the Yankees, so the Blue Jays will win the division automatically. And then so even if the Blue Jays go 4-2 and the Yankees go 6-0, the Yankees will not win the division. Toronto will still win that division because of the tiebreaker. So that's why I think it's 50-50, because I could see Toronto maybe going 3-3, just because I can see Boston potentially winning 2 out of 3, and then them winning 2 out of 3 against Tampa. But all Toronto has to do is go 4-2. That's the only thing they have to do. Win 2 out of 3 against Boston, 2 out of 3 against Tampa, and they have the division locked. So that's why it's 50-50, because I could totally see that happening. I could totally see Toronto going 3-3, and the Yankees going 5-1 or 6-0. So unfortunately, the Yankees, even the Yankees do their job and go 6-0, Toronto can still win the division out, and the Yankees have no say, because, like I said, they have a 2-game lead. They don't have to play perfect. They can just go 4-2, like I mentioned, still win that division. So it's 50-50. Do I want the Yankees to win the division? Of course. Avoid the wild card and things like that. But if the Yankees, let's say, don't win the division, I think the Yankees can still get back to the World Series, just because the AL is open. As Toronto, I get Toronto's had a good year, but in a playoff game, I don't know if I could trust Toronto. I mean, we look like the Blue Jays had this division wrapped up a couple weeks ago, and yet here we are. Now the Yankees still have a shot to go out there and freaking potentially win the division with 6 games to go. And it's not like the Blue Jays being up 2 games is all of a sudden automatic that they're going to win the division. I mean, it's still enough games for the Yankees to make up ground. But certain things are going to have to happen. It's out of the Yankees' control. They can only just win the games, what they should just do anyway. It's better for the Yankees to go into the playoffs being 6-0. They've already since August 15th. They played very well, the Yankees. So finish the season strong. You feel good about the team heading into the playoffs. Teams that usually head into playoffs playing well tend to do well and catch fire and do have big runs in the playoffs, like the Mets last year, or even the Yankees, considering they played decent September. Actually, had a solid September, helped them win the division. Then they got to the World Series, and the American League this year, it's wide open to me. And I can totally see the Yankees getting back to the World Series just because how wide open the American League is. And plus, the Yankees do have some talent. They have good talents too with their team. I know the bullpen's a little concerned because the bullpen since in the month has not been consistent. But we'll wait and see. I want to see how the bullpen looks these final 6 games. Maybe just to see if I'm confident in this bullpen. But I still think the Yankees can get back to the World Series even if they don't win the division. As much as I want them to win the division, if they don't, I can still see them win the wild card round and then going from there to the World Series. Let's not forget the Phillies in 2022 won playing the wild card round, beat St. Louis 2 straight, then beat the Braves, beat the Padres, and LCS got to the World Series. Texas Rangers they beat Tampa in 2, swept the Orioles, beat the Astros in 7, and then won the World Series. So just because you're in the wild card round does not mean you can't get to the World Series. So I do want to mention that. And so I do want to mention that with that. So if any Yankee fans are concerned about the wild card, it might be so tougher. Yeah, it's tougher, but doesn't mean they can't get to the World Series. We've seen 2 teams already do it in this current playoff format who play in the wild card round. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the AL East and the Yankees. That it's 50-50. Hopefully they can win it, but if they don't, they still got a shot. And their bullpen, like I said, their bullpen plays like they're capable of. This team, if healthy, hopefully, no reason why this team can't get back to the World Series. There's really I can totally see this team getting back to the World Series just because I don't trust the rest of the American League. And speaking of the rest of the American League, let's talk about the Detroit Tigers. Man, the Detroit Tigers and then the Mets, of course. Both teams are part of are choking epic collapses. As hear some dogs in the background. Sorry, it's just that dog sitting. That's all. Hang on. Sorry about that. But anyway, back the Tigers, who I believe early September they had 99.9%. I saw like a chance of making the playoffs, something like that. They had it's the Tigers are about to pull off a Minnesota Twins. Remember last year the Twins were like 95%. They had 95% chance of making the playoffs in early September. The Tigers had like a 0.2 chance, like a 2% chance or 0.2% chance, something like that. The Twins collapsed epically last year in September, and then the Tigers got hot and overtook the Twins and made that final wild card spot. And the shocking baseball, in terms of getting the playoffs, when no one thought Detroit was a playoff team, especially since they traded Jack Flaherty, who's having a great year, to the Dodgers and all that last season. Now the Tigers are in reverse. Now they're the team choking. They're the team that's now they're pulling of Minnesota Twins from last year, and the Cleveland Guardians are now freaking the team that's the last year's Tigers as the Detroit Tigers since July 8th are 26-37. That's something I read from Ken Rosendahl, and it's true. And then also the Mets, who had the best record in all of baseball June 12th, and then June 13th when this losing skid started, they had the best record in the National League. Since then, they're 35-53. The Mets, here right here says since June 13th, which is in that stretch the fourth worst record in baseball since June 13th. The Mets, the Tigers, 26-37 since July 8th. But even then, Tigers still had a big lead. Like nobody thought, the Tigers are gonna choke, because I think the Tigers in July had like a bad stretch in July, like late July, but then August it seemed to turn around. So we all thought, the Tigers are fine. At one point in July, the Tigers had a 15-game lead, July 6th, over the Cleveland Guardians. Look, you see right here. Look at this lead they had in July. 13 over Minnesota, 14 over Kansas City, 15 over Cleveland. This is like 78 Red Sox Yankees shit, where the Red Sox famously had that 14-game lead in in was it August? I think it was August. Yeah, it was August or late July against the Yankees. I'm forgetting. I know they had a 14-game lead. The Red Sox choked. The Yankees caught up to them, and then they had the 1-game playoff in '78 at Fenway Park. That's where the Bucky Dent home run comes in. The Yankees win the game, win the World Series that year, back to back. It kind of it's reminding me of that '78 Red Sox because they had that 14-game lead against the Yankees, and then they collapsed, and the Yankees caught up to them. And then here's the record with the freaking Tigers in September 1st. Look how many games they led Cleveland. They had a 10.5 game lead over Cleveland, 9 game lead over Kansas City. Like even September 1st, that was the record. September 1st, 10 game lead against Cleveland, and they're choking, straight choking. Then the Mets record, let me pull up right here for you guys to see on June 12th to prove my point about them having the best record in baseball by win percentage on June 12th. You see Tigers in the American League, and then you see the Mets. It's ironic both teams are collapsing. Whoever thought June 12th that both teams had a shot of missing the playoffs and choking, I don't think anybody would have thought that in June 12th or June 13th. We all looked at you like you were crazy, like you're just saying shit just to say shit. And then hopefully you guys see the record on June 13th as the Tigers had the best record by win percentage in baseball, and then the Mets record in the National League. And it's crazy. The Cubs had a better record in Milwaukee at that point. This is when Milwaukee started going off, and then their win streak as Milwaukee's clearly gonna have the best record in baseball. And yeah, this is crazy, man. What's going on? And there's a real possibility both teams do miss the playoffs because let me pull up the schedule. The Tigers' remaining schedules is against Cleveland, 3 games against Cleveland, who just swept them, who's hot right now. They're 9-1 the last. I think they're 9-1 the last 10 or 10-0. Something like that. And then they got played Boston. And by the way, all on the road. They went 0-6 in their final home stretch. They lost 3 straight to Cleveland and Detroit, and then they lost 3 straight to Atlanta, who's missing the playoffs, who's not as good as they previously been, the Braves, because of injuries and all that type of stuff. They're so they got to go on the road to Cleveland against the Cleveland Guardians, and then they got to go to Boston at Fenway Park. And who knows, depending on the Toronto series, Boston may still have a lot to play for. They may try to clinch a playoff spot and also clinch that second wild card and try to avoid missing the playoffs themselves. So these are tough games for Detroit. Two teams have a lot to play for, and it's possible Detroit. I think right now is up a game in the division, and if they get swept potentially, or even I think even lose the series against Cleveland 2 out of 3, Cleveland's gonna have the division lead, which is just crazy to think about. Like who saw that coming? I didn't see this coming. Then the Mets. The Mets have 3 games 3 games against the Cubs in Chicago, and then 3 in Miami against the Marlins. So all on the road. And if you're a Met fan, playing Miami at the end of the year brings back bad memories, PTSD Met fans have playing the Marlins at the end of the year, just because 2007, their final 3 games were against the Marlins. And we know how that final game went against the Marlins. Tom Glavine was terrible, and the Mets choked at Shea Stadium. And then the final game at Shea Stadium, 08, the Marlins beat them. And the final game at Shea Stadium is the Mets missed the playoffs by 1 game, just like they missed the playoffs by 1 game in 07. People forget the Mets in 08 did have a collapse. It wasn't as big as the 07 one, but they still had a collapse. Like they had like a 3.5 game lead in mid-September in the division, and they choked. The Phillies won that division, and they missed the playoffs by 1 game against Milwaukee. They're 1 game behind Milwaukee for that final playoff spot. Now, had there been the extra wild card like that we had from 2012 to 2021, the Mets would have made the playoffs both years, but they missed it. So if the Mets have been playing bad since June. So there's been like a steady decline the Mets. And you also got to remember the Mets got Juan Soto. They signed Juan Soto. They went to the NLCS last year. They brought back P. Alonso, and they brought back Sean Manaea. And to me, if the Mets missed the playoffs, this is arguably worse than 07 because the 07 collapse is infamous in Met history. It's one of the worst collapses in baseball history. This rivals it. This could be worse because think about it. Remember, after 06, when they lost the NLCS to the Cardinals, the Mets didn't exactly sign anybody in the free agency. They didn't have any big free agent signings at all. And they didn't exactly need to because they had a young nucleus and also Carlos Delgado. He wasn't young, but he's still a great player, still putting up great numbers at that point. Yeah, David Wright, Carlos Beltran, Jose Reyes. Paulo Duca had a good 06. So, the Mets Mets had confidence in their core. Plus, But still, the Mets probably should have in that season addressed their pitching. That's where and it came to bite them in the ass during the '07 season. Here in this season, the Mets this past season, the Mets got Juan Soto from the Yankees. They signed a superstar in his prime away from their crosstown rivals, which something they never do. They brought back Pete Alonso. They brought back Sean McKnight, who had a great 2024. And you're thinking, oh man, Steve Cohen spent all his money. They got the big free agent from the Yankees. If you're a Met fan, you're probably thinking, there's no reason why he can't get back. And the Mets go off to this great start, had the best record in baseball on June 12th. Their starting pitching at that point was at the best in all of baseball, I think, in terms of ERA. Since then, they have just choked. It's been a steady decline. It's not like a stock market. Sometimes stocks they just go dip down like this, like quickly. With the Mets, it's more so like they freaking they freaking just it's been a steady decline basically. I'm trying to find the right analogy to describe it, but I think you guys get what I mean though. Yeah, so and this to me is arguably worse because you spent free agency, you have a good lineup. I mean the lineup of Lindor, Soto, Alonso, who all played well, and even Vientos, Mark Vientos, we thought, oh, those four guys and Brandon Nimmo, that's a great 1-5 potentially, and yet they about missed the playoffs because their bullpen has been terrible outside of Edwin Diaz. So our rotation has been trash. I mean, for the most part, they had the young guys, but the problem is they brought them in. It might be too late by the time they brought these guys in, and so yeah, man, I think this is based on everything. If the Mets miss the playoffs, this is worse. This is to me. Damn, I'm trying. You know what? I'm debating if this is worse than '07. It's 50-50. You know what? I know it's a cop out, but I'm just gonna say it because if the Mets missed the playoff, this is like up there of '07 just because of the free agency, what they did. They having the best record in baseball, and it's been and there's more wild card teams than '07. Remember, in '07 is only one wild card team. You have three wild card teams make the playoffs, and then you go out there and miss the playoffs for the Mets after. After freaking after having two extra wild cards compared to '07, and you have a better and you've had and you've spent money in the free agency, and you haven't played the best record in baseball. Yeah, this you know what this will be worse than '07 just because of that alone. This is worse than 2007 for sure. And looking at the wild card standings right here, for Arizona's only game behind too. Let's not forget that. Arizona could sneak in and overtake the Mets and Reds. The Reds, who are not a great team at all, a young team who's definitely overachieving. You let the Reds catch up to you. The Reds, excuse me, the Reds in the last 15 games are 10-5. And as you see, the Padres just clinched a playoff spot, and so the Cubs, and so the Dodgers, and the Phillies and Brewers. So the Mets are the last wild cards, the only playoff spot it'd be determined in the National League, and the Giants are there, but they're done. The Dodgers destroyed their playoff hopes this past weekend, and then of course the Diamondbacks only a game behind, and the Diamondbacks are playing. I think the Padres at the end of the year, so that can be tricky because the Padres still might have a shot in the division potentially. We'll see because the Dodgers have been hit and miss at times, and then of course the Reds. I think the Reds play the Brewers, but the Brewers at that point probably aren't going to play for much. So I think the Reds are probably going to make the playoffs. Honestly, I think the Reds are going to do it just because I think it's easier for them at the end of the year. I figure they're playing these next three games, but I know they finished their season against the Brewers, and I don't think the Brewers have nothing to play for unless they want to play spoiler, which is possible. They could, but I don't think so. Yeah. So for me personally, I am interested to see these next 6 days his next 5 days or so when he plays these 6 games. Who makes the playoffs? Do the Yankees get the Yankees win the division? Does Toronto does? Does Detroit miss the playoffs entirely? Does Boston somehow miss the playoffs, but Detroit loses the division? Do the Mets somehow make the playoffs? Do they fall out of the playoffs? And do the Reds make it, or does Arizona sneak in and get that final wild card spot somehow? It's crazy. The Diamondbacks, you trade away Josh Naylor, you went to Suarez and Merrill Kelly, and yet they still have a shot to make the playoffs. It's like, damn, they just kept those guys. Who knows? They probably might be competing with the Dodgers and Padres for that division, but Is what it is. Oh yeah, and let me talk about the Tigers. I do want to mention this point. If the Tigers miss the playoffs entirely, or even or even freaking make the playoffs, but as a wild card, this is a top 10 worst collapse in the history of baseball. It's easily to be up 15 in July and be up by 10 in September 1st and choke a division lead like that. They're 1-9, the Tigers, in their last 10. I mean, if the Tigers blow that, top 10 collapse in history of baseball. Matter of fact, it might be top 5 if they miss the playoffs, just because that's just inexcusable. To be up that much and then blow a lead like that and miss the playoffs entirely, especially when you made the playoffs previously. That's just that'd be just crazy. And for me, the Tigers, I know I mentioned like my previous baseball video that I thought the Tigers were somewhat consistent. I realized that was a dumb statement to make because for me, I'm gonna be honest with you, I never bought the Tigers as a serious contender. For some reason, I never bought into them because I look at the Tigers, I'm trying to figure out like what do they do well? Like they're not exactly a power hitting team like top tier. Like, well, I haven't checked that, but I don't associate them with guys who can mash like the Yankees or like Dodgers and stuff. They're not exactly like Milwaukee. They run the bases well, or they hit for average, or they have like a bunch of great pitchers. Don't get me wrong, they have the best starting pitcher in the American League, and Sarah Screwball. But after Screwball, it's like who else? Even the bullpen's kind of questionable. Like they brought, like instead of trained for like got swing and miss guys, they trade for a bunch of like guys who they thought they could turn around and like try to like revitalize their careers, and that's blown up in their face dramatically. The Tigers, so like for me, like I know I mentioned the Tigers were somewhat consistent in my previous because I was saying about how every team has been up and down, hasn't been a consistent team besides Milwaukee, and I kind of like I said maybe Detroit as well. I did say that, and I realized I should have never said that just because I first of all I never bought in Detroit. Well, the thing was I've never bought Tigers as a real contender, but I thought okay, they still have a big lead. Like this is like what 10 days ago I uploaded that video, so I thought okay, still have a big lead. They probably gonna make the playoffs, so I guess they've been consistent. But even then, I was dead wrong about the Tigers. Even though I've never bought into the Tigers like that, I never trust them, but still, even I'm shocked by this. Like, I thought the Tigers probably could lose in the playoffs, but I didn't expect them to choke the division. This is just shocking. Like, nobody saw this coming. Like, if they missed the playoffs, top 5 collapse of all time. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on the whole situation. I think the Tigers collapse is worse than the Mets, just because the Mets this has been going on for a few months now. The Tigers just out of nowhere like that since September. The Tigers collapse is way worse. If they miss the playoffs, this is a top 5 collapse of all time. The Met one could be is top 10. Met it could be it's probably worse than the '07 Mets, but this Tiger one would be worse than both the '07 Mets and the this year's Mets for sure. Like this is up there with like the 1964 Phillies collapse, and what was the other one? I had in my mind the heck, like '95 Angels. Those collapses, the 2011 Braves and Red Sox, like those to me are like the old timer collapses. '78 Red Sox, like you know what I mean? Like this is up there with those ones. Oh, the Mets one's up there, but I think this will be worse than the '07 Mets, the Tiger one. This one they missed the playoffs. So out of the two collapses, and like I said, these might not be collapses because if both teams make the playoffs and the Tigers win the division, it's not collapse. It won't count as a collapse. So there's that possibility. But at the moment, Tiger situation is way worse than the Mets. And if they do collapse, it'll be worse. Both teams collapse, excuse me. The Tigers won't be worse than the Mets. So that's what I'm trying to say. So anyway, that's my thoughts on everything. I think the Yankees is 50-50 of the division. But if they make the wild card, they still have a shot to get the World Series. Tigers, I don't it's 50-50. I can see them losing this division and missing the playoffs. The Mets, I think they have an outside chance looking in. I give them a 40% chance of making the playoffs. 60% chance they miss it. But that's my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think and why. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Let me know. I like to in the comment section. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, share, like, and I'll talk to you guys next time. I'll do MMA video as my next video, more likely. And then by the end of the season, I'll talk about the Yankees and what they're doing and etc. So we'll go from there. Thank you guys for watching and listening. Have a good day, good night. I'll see you guys next time, and peace.